I will start my presentation. So, our topic is therapeutic implications of a neurobiology of a memory in treatment of psychiatric disorders. So, memory, we all know, rather, I can say, memory is the greatest treasure humans can have. So, along with that, memory is having evolutionary value. Until unless we have the memory, we can't have other adaptive functions. So it's a very crucial function our brain having, and because of that, we are surviving through the or evolving throughout the evolution. So I will start with the mechanism of memory, consolidation and reconsolidation. So start with the introduction. The first breakthrough come that the first step in the elucidation of the brain mechanism of a working memory was the discovery of a memory cells in the prefrontal cortex of a monkeys. So it's the thing which relate memory as a function to the brain as an organ. Then the successive years we have another studies and we came to know that memory have different cerebral cortices presentation as per the form. So inferotemporal cortex have working memory of the visual. In anterior parietal cortex it is a tactile or haptic. In posterior parietal cortex it is a visuospatial. Another important finding, I have added this slide because I want to show you that memory not involve only hippocampus, but it is the pan-brain phenomenon. Each and every components of the brain it's involved in it. So, in the analysis of functional imaging showed that in the maintenance of a working memory, there is a concomitant activation of a prefrontal region, that is a frontal lobe, together with that one of the several posterior regions like I said earlier, which vary depending on the modality of the memorandum. This is the 2015 study. Earlier studies were in the 1970s and 80s. So it is the very crucial evidence we are having. So our topic, what is a consolidation? So memory consolidation refers to the process by which a temporary labile memory is transferred into more stable, long-lasting form. So whenever we see something, it is stored into our working memory, and after that it's converted into the long-term memory. That process we are going to study. Learned material remains vulnerable to interference for a period of time after learning. The key observation was that recent memories are more vulnerable to injury or disease than remote memories. These findings mainly came from the animal studies we are having, and even human studies are under trial and they are also showing similar kind of results. Also, under some conditions, long-term memory can transiently return to a labile state and then gradually stabilize, a phenomenon termed reconsolidation. Reconsolidation we will see in detail, but I just want to say that memory is in a fluid state and it can be consolidated and reconsolidated as and when needed. So consolidation, some scientific evidence, whenever we have exposure to any visual, auditory, haptic or tactile memory, it initiate with a gene expression dependent phase that lasts for several hours or days. This process, known as a cellular or molecular consolidation, represents the initial highly fragile phase of a memory storage. It also involves a relatively brief cascade of molecular and cellular events that alter synaptic efficacy as well as the prolonged systems level interaction between the hippocampus and cerebral cortex. So not only the systems are changing, but at individual neuronal level and at individual synaptic level, all the things are having structural, physiological and functional changes. That is very something we have to take into note. Additional evidence for a cortico-hippocampal interaction during consolidation comes from studies on hippocampal replay of memories during sleep and other offline states. So there are very good studies on the long-term potentiation or a consolidation of a memory in a sleep. So sleep is a very, sleep really helps in the consolidation of memories. So how it consolidates? Mainly two main processes. Synaptic consolidation, it happens at the molecular and cellular level, and system consolidation. It happens at the hippocampal, cortices, thalamus, all the relay centers at that level. So molecular level, It's mainly happen in the hippocampal and dorsolateral prefrontal cortices. In dorsolateral prefrontal cortices, mainly layer 3rd and layer 6, it's involved in it. And synaptic mechanism, we all know it's a glutamatergic transmission. Whenever glutamate get released, it attaches to NMDA receptor. NMDA receptor, it's the legend gated as well as voltage gated. So whenever it get activated, magnesium get displaced, calcium entered, depolarization happen, and it leads to activity or hyperactivity, which is which is the root cause of the long-term potentiation. So this is a very good process. There are multiple levels, but as the levels are increasing, these are vulnerable to the stress. So whenever stress is there, we all know in stress, cortisol level is very high. Whenever cortisol level is high, it leads to sarcoplasmic calcium release, which leads to cyclic AMP and phosphoryl kinase signaling mechanism activation. So though calcium is available, but it is get poured outside very rapidly, and it delays firing of the postsynaptic relapse, postsynaptic neuron, by which it inhibit the long-term potentiation. So this is in simply pictorial view of the traditional understanding. I added traditional because until now what we understood, there is something called event. Like I said, molecular changes, system level changes, encoding, then consolidation, then fixed memory. But now evidence is there that we can have next stage, we will see gradually. So how this consolidation process happens? Consolidation, it's happened by 3 ways. So first is a consolidation as a linking cortical representations. So there are several variations of the hypothesis. This is the hypothesis that the hippocampus rapidly stores critical information for linking cortical representations, and that during multiple iterations of cortical hippocampal interaction, connections within the cortex are strengthened and eventually support these associations in the absence of hippocampal function. So what it suggests, initially there is a hippocampal storage of a memory, then hippocampal and neocortical interaction happen. Over the repeated happening of those interactions, gradually hippocampal role is reduced. So later on, whenever there is activation of memory, there is very less role of hippocampus, and recovery happened mainly through the cortical areas. But there is again contradictory finding to it. There is also strong evidence that the hippocampus is engaged during any memory processing that involves combination of detailed associative and contextual information, and evidence that cortical networks that are engaged during encoding are re-engaged during recall, even shortly after the learning experience. So what it suggests? Hypothesis is that initially hippocampus is involved, later on neocortices are involved, but this study finds that even later finding or later on recovery of memory also involve hippocampus. So it's a contradictory finding. Second hypothesis is consolidation as a semantic transformation. So in this, any incidents happen, it is initially as autobiographical memory, then over the time it gets converted into semantic memory. Third is a consolidation as a schema modification. So schema, we all know that basically it's termed from Jacques Piaget. Schema is we learn through the pictorization or having some basic theme, and we keep adding knowledge to it. So modification of a schema. So third process is a consolidation as a schema modification. Then we come to the reconsolidation. Like I said, traditional view, we are having only consolidation. But what is the reconsolidation? Extensive, the recalled memory must again be stabilized. This post-retrieval process has been termed memory reconsolidation. So whenever we recall any memory, it become again a very fragile. There is an addition of a new memory to it, and it again get consolidated. So it's again consolidation, we call it as a reconsolidation. So what are the evidences we have? Extensive training and specific time periods between initial training and reminder could result in strong original memory traces that are reactivated as a dominant following a reminder. Effective reminders must be presented for reconsolidation of the original memory. This is very important. Any random recall of memory will not get converted into reconsolidation, but it should be having some behavioral advantage, it should be having some emotional advantage, or it should be presented with the new addition of the memory. It enables consolidated traces to be updated, indicating that stabilization need not imply fixation. So this is very important finding. Earlier we used to have that concept that whenever memory gets consolidated, it's permanent. But by these findings we came to know that it's a continuous process, consolidation and reconsolidation happening day to day. So this is a new kind of understanding we can have. Event, encode, consolidate, fixed memory, but now we know it can get reactivated, then it enter into labile memory state, and it can be get disrupted, it can get restabilized with addition of memory, or it again having, if it is having novel experience, it gets updated into new memory. So, sorry. So, reconsolidation as a process we seen, but system consolidation, how it's associated with reconsolidation, that's we are going to see, and how it's differed from consolidation. So, in a reconsolidation protocol, amnestic agents delivered to the hippocampus could only affect the newly acquired network, that is the reminder, but leave intact the previously consolidated memories. This outcome is not consistent with the finding that even consolidated memories are affected by reminders and damage to the hippocampus. In this study, what we came to know basically, as per the consolidation hypothesis, whenever memory gets fixed, we can't retrieve it, but as per this thing, these are retrievable, and with the use of pharmacotherapeutic agents, these are malleable to the changes. Studies showed that hippocampal reconsolidation is necessary for consolidated memories. And a recent experiment on remote memory showed that the generalized semantic fear responding that normally occurs in non-consolidated context was also dependent on hippocampal reconsolidation. So again, it proves hippocampus is having a very crucial role in a reconsolidation. It is having role in a consolidation, but equally important role in a reconsolidation. So can we say that consolidation is equal to reconsolidation? Why we have that, why we can say like this? Because the cellular substrate of consolidation and reconsolidation are largely shared. They are equal at molecular level and at the system level. But again, the controversy is that dissociations of a particular plasticity molecules or plasticity in general within certain brain structure is required for consolidation but not for reconsolidation. There are some memories like autobiographical memories, some memories which are having very high emotional valence, those bypass these mechanisms. So those mechanisms are activated in consolidation but not get activated in a reconsolidation. Again, the finding on a blockade of reconsolidation following molecular interventions, hippocampal lesion, and inference has led several to suggest that reconsolidation normally involves an updating of memories. These are the recent studies, 2009, 2010. They are showing memories are getting reconsolidated and updated. Dudai and Eisenberg adopted a very similar hypothesis, suggesting that reconsolidation is a manifestation of a lingering consolidation process. So what he suggested, reconsolidation is a continuous process or it is a part of consolidation process, lingering. So with the help of the evidence, we can say that, or we can take a one-step idea further and suggest that reconsolidation is the never-ending consolidation process because it is happening repeatedly over and over. So what I try to incorporate is basically those studies having some practical implications because there are many extensive research is going on in this area. There are multiple animal models, genetic studies, biochemical approaches, structural functional imaging, computational modeling, lesion and specific disorder. Extensive research is going on, but those research is yet to prove its practical applications. So whatever practical applications we are able to implicate or we are applying in day-to-day practice, I have presented that thing. Now I will hand over podium to my colleague, Dr. Harshal. He will mainly emphasize on the application of these concepts in the in the psychotherapies. Thank you.
This the third. Hello. अच्छा वो मैं प्रेजेंट रिव्यू में डालना पड़ता है, इस पे डालना। Thank you, Dr. Muktesh. With the permission of the chair, I'll begin my talk on psychotherapeutic implications of neurobiology of memory. First of all, let us have a brief recap of what exactly memory is. Memory is basically ability to store information for the purpose of later recall. It is a biologically fundamental function essential for survival of humans as they shape our identity and guide our thoughts and decisions to influence the emotional reaction. The classification of memory into short-term and long-term and explicit and implicit memories is based on the difference in the neural structures as well as the manner of storage of the memory in these particular forms. I would like to add that explicit memory is the declarative memory and the implicit memory is largely the procedural memory, which involves basal ganglia and cerebellum as the substrates to store this memory. Let me also add here that the implicit memory also implies the semantic patterns of cognitive storage of the thoughts and the semantic patterns of the emotions, which later form the basis of various psychotherapies. Just prior to the phases of consolidation and reconsolidation, the memories are in the fragile state. Various studies have been done in invertebrates, and it has been found that the recently encoded memories are often in the fragile state. In this state, they are vulnerable to modification. But gradually, as was discussed in the previous presentation, these memories undergo consolidation. But this is not enough. Even the consolidated memories are not permanently fixated, and they enter the fragile state when they are recalled. This process is called as reconsolidation, and it is there for strengthening as well as updating the memory according to the current context. This fragile state, when the memories enter this fragile state, this provides us with a therapeutic opportunity to remove the traumatic memories or to change the emotional valence of these memories. Various traumatic memories, the negative emotional patterns, and cognitive distortions underlie the psychiatric disorders such as depression, anxiety, and changing these memories would prove worthwhile in treatment of these conditions. Let us take a brief introduction of psychotherapy. According to the Oxford, psychotherapy is the treatment of disorders of mind and personality via psychological methods. The following definition given by John Norcross in the American Psychological Association is much more elaborate and included in this presentation as it is the standard definition. Updates in understanding of cognitive, behavioral, and emotional models has led to the evolution of various different types of psychotherapy, such as psychoanalysis, cognitive behavior therapy, and rational emotive behavior therapy. However, it is also found that according to the existing research, the psychotherapy techniques which are already being used and developed before we began to know about the consolidation and reconsolidation process, these therapies are already using this knowledge of consolidation and reconsolidation. In recent times, the newer therapies are also being evolved, which are directly targeting the reconsolidation process. We will view both of them in today's presentation. Let us take a brief view of what are the biological effects of psychotherapy? Psychotherapy has various aspects such as therapeutic alliance, empathy, the verbal and non-verbal communication with the therapist, catharsis, empathy, cognitive restructuring. All of them have shown to have functional and structural changes in the neural networks of the brain. Psychotherapy does this by inducing the changes in the cerebral metabolic rate, as has been shown in the research done on CBT or EMDR on the patients who have received this therapy. The cognitive behavior therapy has also shown to have impact on thyroid axis serotonin systems. The patients who have received 6 months to 1 year of the psychotherapy have shown to have changes in synaptic density, the dendritic spine density. Thereby, these processes are responsible for the brain plasticity. So, the psychotherapy stimulates the brain cells and synapses, and thereby it is a very much biological therapy and not just the talking cure. Let us now begin with how the existing psychotherapies are using the model of memory consolidation and reconsolidation. The dynamic form of psychotherapy was first begun by Sigmund Freud historically in the form of psychoanalysis. In this, the patients were, he examined the patients of hysteria. According to Freud, trauma is associated with strangled affect, that is the inability to express the emotions. Freud suggested that because the patients are not able to express their emotions, they are there is a formation of maladaptive emotional and cognitive patterns. For example, a sexually abused patient, because he cannot talk about what he's suffering, develops cognitive or emotional adaptations such as I am the one who is at blame. And these adaptations are largely in the form of implicit memories. With repeated exposure to various stressful events, these adaptations keep on getting reconsolidated again and again, and this reconsolidation process is responsible for the deviant behavioral patterns and the problems in the emotional regulation. The patients who seek psychodynamic therapy or psychoanalysis typically have a long-standing maladaptive patterns of behavior that they want or need to change. The main mediums through which the dynamic psychotherapy is shown to have effect is analysis of transference and the developmental perspective. Transference is basically the implicit memories of the dysfunctional relating pattern of the patient, and this is projected into the therapist by the patient. The analysis of the transference involves the reactivation of those implicit memories. Developmental perspective basically means that it is about explaining to the patient how the implicit memories that patient has developed is leading to maladaptive behavioral patterns. This change, that is the development of insight in the psychodynamic psychotherapy, is basically the process of interfering with the process of reconsolidation, and it has the therapeutic impact in the dynamic psychotherapy. Consciously experiencing these emotions in a secured environment in which the therapist is having therapist is acceptant, he is supportive. All these emotional patterns, the corrective emotional experience is provided by the presence of acceptance and support, which is extended by the therapist. Let us now move over to the cognitive behavior therapy. This therapy was developed by Aaron Beck, and it finds the wide application across various psychiatric disorders. The therapy is basically based on automatic thoughts, cognitive distortions, and the core beliefs. These are nothing but the semantic structures of thinking and relating. They are basically the implicit memories. The main goal of CBT is to change these patterns rather than the thoughts themselves. During the assessment, the client recalls the traumatic memories. This recall of traumatic memory is found to be analogous to destabilizing a consolidated memory. and the disputation which the therapist offer is found to be analogous to the reconsolidation process. There is a novel form of CBT which has been developed in lines with our knowledge of reconsolidation process. This is called as mood regulation cognitive behavior therapy. The mood regulation cognitive behavior therapy, also called as plus minus plus method, involves basically three things. First is, after mapping the mood of the patient, you have to develop a positive affect, and the bodily reaction in the positive affect is duly noted. After that, the negative emotions, the cognitions related to the negative emotions are identified, and the patient is encouraged to let them go. And following this, the positive affect is combined with the negative affect so as to provide the condition equivalent to counter conditioning. The aim of this therapy is to increase the capacity to retain good emotions and to let go of the emotions by systematically strengthening positive emotions. The application of this protocol has shown significant improvement in the depressed adolescent patients, and they are found to reduce the suicidal ideation, improve the well-being, as well as reduce the depressive symptoms. Anxiety disorders and post-traumatic stress disorder are often treated, but the behavior therapies used to treat them are usually based on exposure therapies. The exposure therapies are basically targeting the maladaptive fear structure. The fear structure includes distressing memories of the event, stimuli, and anticipated emotional response. This maladaptive fear structure keeps the implicit memory of this maladaptive fear structure is maintained because of the avoidance which is shown by the patient. Exposure in the secured environment or other coupling or after coupling with relaxation technique leads to the reconsolidation of the feared memories. This happens in most of the psychotherapies such as exposure and response prevention and systematic desensitization. There is a new form of therapy developed for PTSD by Lanny Rosenwig. It is called as the accelerated resolution therapy. This therapy is based on the principle of EMDR, or eye movement desensitization response treatment, which was classically used for post-traumatic stress disorder. In this therapy also the eye movements are used to invoke the traumatic memory, but this technique is clubbed with visual memory replacement or visual image replacement. The clubbing of this technique with visual memory and the visual image replacement is responsible for the reconsolidation of the fear memories. And as compared to EMDR, this therapy has been found to be quicker, more effective, easier to learn, and more cost effective. The exposure-based cognitive behavior therapy done on the reconsolidation principle was also found to have a speedier and a stronger response in the clients than the extinction treatment that was done alone. In the treatment of addictive disorders, we know that the presence of cues is the major reason for the relapse. The learning theory and social learning models explain why the drinking behavior relapses in front of the cues. Usually coping skill techniques are used to treat the addiction disorders, but exposure to cues is being tried now. Exposure to the cues reactivates the drinking memory, and the reactivation of this memory makes them candidate for change. The repeated presentation of cue while simultaneously preventing drinking response can lead to habituation and extinction. However, if the cue exposure is coupled with the coping skill practice, then the effectiveness increases even more. The studies have found it to be more effective, the combination of these two techniques to be more effective. Other therapies using principles of reconsolidation include the emotion-focused therapy. This is just like cognitive behavior therapy, but here the semantic structure which is changing is basically the emotions. In the emotion-focused therapy, the basic thing that we are trying to change is the negative emotions. whatever may be the reason for the development of these negative emotions, the patient is asked to duly note of how are the negative emotions. After that, using visual imagery or using the systematic cognitive restructuring techniques, the patient is asked to develop the positive affect. Now, whenever there is a new emotional response, whenever there is a painful memory, the patient is asked to apply the similar tenets to develop the positive effect. The combination of this positive effect and the negative effect is thought to reconsolidate the painful memory with alternate as well as acceptable interpretation. The emotion focus relatively newer form of therapy in the humanistic school of psychotherapy. The treatment has found in studies significant improvement in the adults experiencing the emotional problem. The other therapies which are based on the consolidation and reconsolidation model are coherence therapy. This therapy was initially called as depth-oriented brief therapy, and it is based on the complete coherence of unconscious knowing, meanings, and feelings that underlie and maintain the great majority of symptoms and problems presented by the therapy client. It was founded by Bruce Ecker and Laurel Hulley in 1990s, and it is currently considered among the most well-respected postmodern constructivist therapies. There is one more technique called as the Alexander technique. In this, there is the retraining of habitual patterns of movements and posture. In this, the therapist is continuously with the patient and guides him to shun the unhealthy postures. The principles of consolidation and reconsolidation are used in this particular technique as well. However, both the coherence therapy and Alexander therapy do not have the proper randomized control trial evidence for the benefit in the mental health disorder. The authors, I would also like to add that gratitude therapy has not been studied systematically in the light of consolidation and reconsolidation process. The popular gratitude practices such as remembering the positive things every day or acknowledging the achievements and possessions voluntarily have shown to increase the positive affect, subjective happiness, and life satisfaction. However, even if we remember our entire day in the light of the gratitude, it would be akin to reconsolidating the memories acquired in the entire day in a better interpretative mode. And as a result, the increased positive affect, subjective happiness, and life satisfaction in the gratitude in the gratitude-based intervention can also be explained on the basis of consolidation and reconsolidation of the memories. I would now like to hand over the mic to Anant for throwing light on pharmacological research in the therapeutic implications of neurobiology.
Pointer आगे. So now we'll see the implications of neuroplasticity in pharmacotherapy of psychiatric disorders. So moving on to directly to the what are the studies that has been done and what are the evidences. As has been presented by my previous presenter, that extinction is the main phenomena on which most of the behavioral therapies are based. And as we have seen that consolidation and reconsolidation process initially involves same neurobiological substrates, that is NMDA receptor dependent form of neuroplasticity. So it implies logically, it follows logically that drugs that facilitate the NMDA receptor function might promote a variety of NMDA receptor dependent form of neuroplasticity that includes extinction and may be of help in treating psychiatric disorders. So what are the studies that has been done and what are the disorders that has been targeted? Most research, well researched, is D-cycloserine. D-cycloserine is a partial agonist of glycine B coagonist site at NMDA receptors, and it has been tested in mainly in panic disorder, but has also been found to be effective in phobias, social anxiety disorder, and OCDs. So how does D-cycloserine help in as an adjunct to psychotherapy? D-cycloserine enhances the NMDA receptor functioning, thereby increasing the neuroplasticity when the new memory is forming, or it may interfere with the reconsolidation. So how this may happen? Being a partial agonist, if the synaptic environment is rich in glycine, then D-cycloserine will work to decrease the function of NMDA receptor. While when there is scarcity of glycine in the synaptic environment, then D-cycloserine will increase the NMDA receptor function. So it can act both ways. Another molecule that has been studied and found to be effective is propranolol, that is beta blocker, and it leads to preferentially disruption of reconsolidation of fear-related learning, and found to be effective in many studies in PTSD. But later it has not been found effective as a preventive measure. Now we can also include the other psychiatric aspects, other psychiatric disorder not directly related to memory but related to neuroplasticity as a neurobiological substrate. So glycine related substances like glycine, D-alanine, D-serine has been found to be increasing the effectiveness of antipsychotics. Even clozapine, which is the most effective antipsychotic by all means, has found to have an intrinsic glycine transporter activity, which leads to superior efficacy, and especially in cognitive symptoms. So even in when we are giving cognitive remediation therapy in schizophrenia patients, these can be exploited. Coming to the other disorder like depression, it has been found that in depression there is decrease in the neurotrophic factors. There is also decrease in the density of neurons. There is also decrease in the neurogenesis or gliogenesis. So BDNF is decreased. So it has been found that we can search those drugs which increases these neurotrophic factors, and that will eventually lead to benefit in these diseases also by increasing the plasticity. So as it has been also found that when combining the treatment of psychotherapy along with antidepressant, the effect is more. So this can also be explained on the basis of that while using psychotherapy, if we are combining them with antidepressant, the antidepressant increases the neuroplasticity, increases the BDNF, and increases the effectiveness of the psychotherapies also. Another important research to mention is that it has been found that there is a lot of cognitive dysfunction in schizophrenia. It is also proposed that long-term administration of neuroleptics actually downregulates the D1 receptor function, which leads to working memory deficits, and that can be reversed by a D1 agonist. But it is found that by repeatedly giving D1 agonist on regular basis actually leads to tolerance. So one strategy can be giving in very low doses and intermittently, that will surmount the problem of tolerance. Another, we can use neurostimulation also. Neurostimulation, RTMS, we know that we can use different frequencies for different duration to either increase activity in one brain area and decrease activity in another area. So by this it can be helpful in both cognitive function, in improving the cognitive functions, and in treatment resistant auditory hallucinations also. Apart from the use in psychiatric disorders, there are researches going on to increase the memory and cognition in normal subjects also. So few research has been done, but most of the molecules are under initial stages of trial, especially ampakines. So as we have discussed both the psychotherapeutic aspect and pharmacological aspects of implications of neurobiology of memory, what are the limitations of clinical translation of this reconsolidation interference? As we have seen that if the stimulus that is presented during the therapy, if it's exactly same as the stimulus which led to the memory at the first place, there will be no novelty in that. There will be no expectancy violation. So that will not lead to reconsolidation. But if it is very completely different, then it will lead to formation of new engram, a new trace. So both of these extremes are not very helpful. So we are actually left with very narrow margin where the stimulus should have some novelty but should not be completely different from the initial stimulus. That's why the translating this research into clinical application is bit tricky. Another challenge will be that in few disorder like in depression which follows grief reaction or bereavement, the problem is not that there is the expectation of exact thing happening again like in panic disorder, but instead there is intrusive memory of trauma. But so this kind of intrusive memory does not lead to activation of the same engram. So that is also one of the clinical challenges. Another clinical challenge will be the phenomena of generalization. So as we know that the stimulus which originally led to the fear need not elicit that fear every same time, but any stimulus which is related to that has some sort of similarity will lead to the anxiety attack. So that this is known as generalization. So while doing therapy, we cannot include all of the cues that are similar to the original stimulus. So apart from that, as it has been mentioned by my earlier speakers, that not all memories are similarly susceptible to reconsolidation, especially those memory which are very remote, which has been consolidated and reconsolidated again and again by remembering. They are more resistant to destabilization. So further areas of research, we should, as no studies have taken into consideration this factor of expectancy violation, we should do more clinical trials taking into consideration that. Apart from that, we should, instead of removing the memory entirely, we should target and focus on preventing the excessive generalization of that memory. These are my references. Thank you.
कुठून बोलू रे? सोनार का रॉयल? सामान तिकडे आहे ना. हॅलो, हा तिकडे पाठवा बरं का ITC सोनारला गाडी लगेच. हां, कोणाला? ओके, माझा मोबाईल बंद होता फ्लाईट मोडला, मी चेक करतो आता. नाही, लगेच पाहिजे बरं का फक्त तो, तिकडे गर्दी आहे एअरपोर्टला.